Hi, and welcome to our World Recreational Fisheries Conference interview series, recorded live from the conference. I'm joined now by Dr. Judy Mann Lang, marine conservation strategist dedicated to inspiring people to care for the ocean. After more than 30 years with the South African Association for Marine Biological Research, she now serves as an executive of strategic projects at the Two Oceans Aquarium Foundation. She's also an associate professor at Rhodes University and research associate at Nelson Mandela University, supporting students and advancing research. Her work focuses on behavioral change, conservation education, and the human dimensions of conservation, helping people and science connect more effectively. Judy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Nicola. It's good to be here.
How would you describe what you do to someone who loves fishing but doesn't necessarily work in academia or science?
That's a really good question. So my work is all around communication. So how can we more effectively communicate with anglers? How can scientists communicate more effectively with anglers? How can anglers effectively communicate with the scientists? And how can we bring managers into that mix? And this is something that's really been close to my heart since I started my career, when I realized that actually communication is the one thing that links us all, but it's also something that hasn't really been focused on a lot. So communication is what I do across multiple facets, and working with the fishing community is just one of them.
Why are, speaking to that, conferences like the World Recreational Fisheries Conference so important in that regard?
So when we think about marine science community, in the last few years, there's been a really strong focus on the human dimensions, marine social science. And this has been building over for probably the last 15, 20 years. And it's been an interesting space because there have been very different research paradigms between the social scientists and the natural scientists. And what I found really interesting at this RecFish conference is how connected the recreational fishing scientists are with the human dimensions. So there have been far more presentations on the human aspects of recreational fishing than I think that we would expect to see at a traditional marine science conference. And I think that shows the integrated nature of recreational fishing. It's about fish, but it's just as much about fishers. And that's what I found really surprising and a fantastic opportunity to showcase this to the world.
Definitely. You mentioned that you work in communication. Obviously, this comes hand in hand with education, and then a big part of what you do is conservation education as well. Why is it so important for recreational fishers to form part of these conservation strategies?
The bottom line, I think, that we've always said is that you don't manage fish, you manage fishers, and fishers are an absolutely integral part of fisheries management. Without voluntary compliance, we're actually never going to be able to support healthy fish stocks. There is no amount of enforcement that's ever going to manage to keep fish stocks healthy. So we need anglers themselves to have the motivation. They need to want to do it. They need to have the capability. They need to know how to do it. And they need to have the opportunity. So we need to make sure that the technical advances, that the opportunity to do the right behavior is there. So we need to really support anglers as much as we can so that they can voluntarily lead the way and create those social norms so that recreational anglers become leaders in conservation. And as opposed to being seen as the bad guys, they become seen as the leaders, the people that are actually conserving those stocks.
What challenges are you facing at the moment?
I think that when we look at this, there are obviously multiple challenges, and those challenges start with individuals themselves. So while there's a huge community of people who really do want to work together, fishers wanting to work together with scientists wanting to work together with the fishers, there is an enormous group that actually don't want anything to do with each other. So that's the one thing that we need to get over. We need to build that will. If we look forward, we're looking at an incredibly difficult geopolitical world. We're looking at an economic world that's very unstable. Climate change is another thing that's hitting us. So it's almost as though the recreational fishing community is a microcosm that's impacted by all of these bigger issues. And it's looking at what can we achieve within our environment? How can we make things better locally? Start local, work with local clubs, work with local communities, and then let that ripple out. If we look at the big picture, it becomes overwhelming. We need to focus on what we can achieve within our own communities first.
A lot of that is obviously behavioral change. Why is understanding human behavior so critical to this change?
So human behavior is something that really fascinates me, because I've realized when I started in my career 30 plus years ago, I just believed that if people knew what the right thing was, they would do the right thing. And I've realized that it's absolutely not as simple as that. So knowledge does not necessarily need to action. We need to understand people. We need to understand what are the benefits of them doing the behaviors that we want. We need to understand what are the barriers, what's stopping them. How can we support them more effectively? How can we communicate? How can we really listen to understand? And key to all of that is understanding our audience. So most important, and that's where many of the presentations about understanding the audiences have been so good, because that's the starting point. We start off with understanding our audience, then we start looking at the behaviors that we're looking for, and then we can take it from there. But really building an understanding of our audience is the first step.
You are delivering a keynote at this conference. Please, can you speak to what your keynote will address?
So my keynote's going to address quite a bit of what we've covered in this podcast. So I'm going to look at a tackle box for scientists on how to communicate more effectively with fishes. So I'm going to be uncovering and exploring a whole range of different techniques, ways that scientists can start to communicate more effectively. And what's great is that I've been listening to all of the presentations, so I'm making lots of changes to my presentation as we go along. But I'm really hoping that by the end of my presentation, people will have some ideas of what they can do to make it easier for them, and that we'll be able to share those ideas with each other.
We're on day 3 of the conference at the moment. Is there anything that you've learned over the last few days that you, as someone who has 30 years of experience in this space, you thought to yourself, wow, actually, that's given me a different perspective?
Oh, of course. I've been to many presentations and I've come out of those presentations going, wow, I really want to explore that idea better. Let's see what we can do with this. So I've learned so much already, and it's just the early days. But it's looking at applying new ideas, new techniques to different contexts. So I am learning about techniques and ideas that I can now apply to work in ocean literacy, that I can apply to human-wildlife conflict work, that I can apply to evaluation work. So that's really been the strength of the conference, is being able to look, to learn, and then to see how we can apply it in different contexts.
Definitely. What is the state of the nation at the moment with regards to our ocean?
So I try to be an ocean optimist, and I focus on what we're getting right. The reality is quite frightening. So when I look at the reality of ocean acidification, of temperature changes, when I look at the changes in corals and what's happening, destruction of corals, when I look at overexploitation, there are so many things that we could look at in terms of the ocean and say, oh my goodness, we're doomed. But I refuse to do that, because that doesn't actually help us. I look at where can we make a difference. And in South Africa, we've got marine protected areas. They're incredible. We've got a network. We've got 5% of our EEZ in marine protected areas. We now need to manage those. We need to make sure that they're effective. But that's where we come back to working with fishers, whether they're commercial, recreational fishers. How can we build up small-scale fishers? How can we build up actual support on the ground? How can we help them to see that their actions make a difference, positive or negative? So that's one of the things that gives me hope, is our MPAs. We have an amazing network of people around South Africa who care really passionately about the ocean. How can we expand that? How can we help to bring more people into our ocean community and to care about the ocean? We've got such an amazing ocean environment around South Africa. Just diving here inspires me. And then the young people are another source of inspiration to me. Whenever I see some of our young students, some of the presentations at this conference have been so inspiring. So I think that bringing up the next generation is something that also keeps me positive and motivated.
Speaking about the next generation, for those listening to this podcast and perhaps those attending the conference, what is one mindset or action that you want them to go away with, that they can install in their everyday that'll make a difference?
I think the most important thing we can do is think. I always say stop and think. And that applies to so many aspects of our lives. whether it's taking a plastic bottle and stopping and thinking and saying, what's going to happen to this plastic bottle, right the way through to our transport choices, things like that. And then also stopping to think that others don't necessarily have the luxury of making those choices. So it's looking slightly broader and really understanding that we live in an incredibly unequal society. So what can we do to help across the board? So it starts with my actions, it starts with my family, it starts with my community, and then taking it further from there. But I think that my big message is that don't try and change the world. Just look what you can do locally in your own environment and start there.
Judy, I have to ask, do you enjoy fishing?
I do enjoy fishing. I started fishing with my dad from the age of 2 years old. So fishing has been in my blood as long as I can remember. I don't fish as much as I used to, but I do still enjoy fishing with my husband.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for the work that you do and for joining us at this conference.
Thank you so much. I look forward to the podcast series.